Richard Steinen, author, consultant, internet marketing expert, has written a book called Up and to the Right that's available on Amazon, and it's available both in print format and on Kindle. I've read it. I thought it was brilliant, and for that reason invited Richard on the show. And Richard's going to walk us through really, I think, the framework of this book and explain to us why why it's so important to get up into that upper right-hand quadrant of Gartner's Magic Quadrant. So, Richard, take it away.
Great, thanks, Max, and thank you for just developing the technology that makes this possible. I'm not looking at the screen everybody else is looking at because, of course, you and I are connected by Google Hangout right now. So there'll be a little back and forth as I switch screens and share here. So let me introduce myself. I'm Richard Steinen. So I am a industry analyst, and I focus on the niche of cybersecurity. But as an analyst for 12 years now, I've worked with marketing teams at probably close to 1,000 companies. And so I've seen it from both ends, because I've also had some experience as a chief marketing officer for a major security appliance vendor, not publicly traded. And seeing it from both ends, you learn the tricks of the trade. And you learn some things that may be obvious to professionals in the space, but maybe not so obvious. And when I've seen the available material out there, I said, I've got something to add to it. So I wrote a book and self-published it, as you know. And you should be seeing an infinity of Max right now. So
there you
go. The book is Up and to the Right. Can you still see me, Max, or just
no? We're straight on the No,
okay,
we're on the book. It's perfect.
All right, so welcome to my virtual book launch. I'm Richard Steinen, and it's my email address there, richard@steinen.com or richard@itharvest.com, and my Twitter ID, of course, is Steinen. This book I published in mid-July, and it's already peaked at number 22 in marketing books on Amazon, and I've been completely astounded by the positive reviews it's getting. I thought at least that the analyst community would stomp all over this. Oh, this is obvious, everybody knows this or whatever, but the analysts are eating it up because it tells their story. And they even tell me that they laugh when they read the book, and I'm not known for my ability to make people laugh, so I'm pleased with that. I want to dig into the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So we've got a mix of attendees today. So we have people from the IT community who actually use Magic Quadrants or are Gartner clients, or at least get exposed to the Magic Quadrants. And we've got people online today that are vendors. So there's two stories to tell. And first of all, let's just look at the Magic Quadrant. Everybody online has probably seen one of these before. The two axes, completeness of vision and ability to execute, define this quadrant. The thing to realize is the process that the analysts go through to position these dots on this Magic Quadrant. The completeness of vision is, at least as I say in the book, this is the analyst's vision of where the industry is going. Sometimes an analyst wants to push the industry a certain way. Sometimes they're just observers trying to predict which way it's going. They acquire that vision of where it's going by talking to end users. I'll stress over and over and over again that Gartner's client base of 11,000 companies are probably, at least include the 10,000 largest companies around the world. And they are universally acknowledged by Gartner and themselves when they survey them as late adapters. So these are big companies that buy established products. They tend to fall into the nobody got fired for buying IBM category, which is a challenge for the supervisionary new companies on the market, and that's what leads to a lot of the negative perceptions about the Magic Quadrant. So the completeness of vision, it usually includes the feature sets. includes the direction and the ability to articulate that vision, and the ability to execute our typical business metrics. So overall size of the company, number of employees, number of people in R&D, number of people in sales and marketing, the amount of budget that's devoted to R&D or research in your particular arena, if you've got some sort of subscription and content model that you push out to your product. And the analyst, once a year, or maybe every 6 months, depending on how fast-moving a space is, send a questionnaire out to all of the vendors that they deemed belong in their Magic Quadrant. So it's a whole other issue I go into in the book is how do you make sure you're on the Magic Quadrant. But usually you have to pass a couple of gates, and the gate might be over 10 million in revenue, a global penetration, so you've got offices all over the world, something like that gets you on it. But then after that, it's a combination of your answers to these questions in the Magic Quadrant questionnaire that you receive, and you got about 5 days from the day you get the questionnaire to the time you have to submit it. I see so many vendors that kind of forget every year that there's going to be a new Magic Quadrant. So when they get the email with the attachment, they scramble and have to get a hold of the guy in product management so they can get some of the answers, have to get a hold of the CFO so they can get permission to release some of the financials. It's a mad scramble, fire drill, and you don't want to be in that position. You should have at least as close a relationship with your analyst that you know when that's coming. So it should be no surprise. You should be bugging the analyst for it. So when it comes, you've got everything set in motion to do the best job you can in responding. The analyst then gathers all these spreadsheets. They've got some pretty cool tools for basically compiling them all. And they score each response on a score of 1 through 5. And then they rank each question on 1 through 3. So you can see how you could quickly get up to a score from 0 to 15 total for each of the questions. And then they sum them all up. And when they push a button, a Magic Quadrant is generated. Usually it doesn't look like the one you're looking at on the screen. Usually all the vendors are so fairly close, the deltas between the capabilities are small, that they all end up clustered around the crosshairs in the middle. So you just apply a little scaling factor and you blow it up. So it tends to exaggerate small differences, which leads to some of the issues with Magic Quadrant, because somebody, for instance, here in the Leaders Quadrant, the guy that's farthest up to the right might only be marginally better than one of those other 2 dots, but because of that scaling factor, you got this, it's certainly a graphic that looks better and easier to comprehend. Okay, the big question that comes up first, so I'm going to address it first, always comes up, is the idea that Gartner is pay to play. In other words, the ones that are farthest up and to the right pay the most to Gartner. The answer to that is no, it's not pay to play. And I'm not a shill for Gartner. I don't work there, haven't worked there for 7 years, but just the coincidence that, hey, IBM is up and to the right, sure, IBM spends a lot of money on Gartner. They're a huge company. They got many, many products, and they've got many, many analysts, and they've got many buyers of IT products that need access to Gartner stuff. So they're probably a big client of Gartner, but they are not getting paid. And what's the wall and separation? Gartner does a lot. They've got an ombudsman program that can intercede between vendors and the analysts in order to, if there's any discussion about unfairness, that comes up. I can attest that when I was a Gartner analyst, usually I had no clue as to the contractual relationship between the vendors I was working with and Gartner. So it's just not something the analysts pay attention to. But what it is, and the advice to vendors is, it's a pay-to-influence game. The more money, and I'm going to go through some of the steps of how you interact with Gartner. In order to interact with Gartner, you have to have a client access license, a subscription. You have to go to their trade shows. You have to interact with them. You have to have them come in to your office so you can spend a day with them. All expensive propositions. Thus, very small companies, usually the ones that are under 10 million, maybe under 20 million, who don't have a client relationship with Gartner, don't have that same ability to influence. So does it come down to pay to play? I don't think so. I think you can also influence Gartner without paying them a penny, and I've seen it happen many times, and I advised a lot of clients that aren't at that size yet where they can't engage directly with Gartner. So there's two major things that I introduce in the book that I think are new. One is the MQ strategy, and this is a whole of company approach. I talk to analyst relations people or VPs of marketing, and the CEO tasks them with getting to a certain position in the Magic Quadrant, and quite often the VP of marketing will commit to getting to a certain position. I advise everybody, never ever do that. You do not control your position in the Magic Quadrant, but the Magic Quadrant is, if it's done correctly and if it's accurate and objective, will actually track your company's growth in the marketplace compared to your competitors. That makes it a whole of company approach to moving that dot up and to the right. What I mean by whole of company means that sales, marketing, the CEO, the CFO, all have to look at their real go-to-market plans and their real plan for growth and eventual exit, if it's an acquisition or an IPO, and they have to match that to where they expect their position to be in the Magic Quadrant. And then it's marketing and the analyst relations team's responsibility to make sure that the position in the Magic Quadrant, as you jump from these different positions, so each of these moves from position to position on the graph could be a year. And if you start out as a niche player, you line up all your competitors that are identified on the Magic Quadrant, and you do your own analysis. You determine, take your best guess at their revenue and their number of employees, stack yourself up against them, and then look at the features, look at their feature sets, which of course you're doing, right? You know what your competition has. You look at their feature set, stack it up against yours, and sure, you've got the best way to accomplish a certain task, but you haven't pushed it out so you can accomplish that task on 20,000 endpoints or manage it from a dashboard. So there are tasks that you have to accomplish before you'll be considered a leader. You map that out, and you've got a static picture of today where you should belong. If your dot is below a competitor that you think you should be above, then you have to do a better job of influencing the analyst. If you're above, you're lucky. You have to defend that position. Somehow you got there, but it could change overnight as soon as the analyst gets a clue. So that's the strategy, but you have to have a plan to execute against the strategy. And that's when I introduced the influence pyramid. And how could I, in one graphic, describe how influence works, right? Because influence is a global concern of millions and millions of people. So let's at least reduce it to the bottom of the pyramid is your addressable market. All of your potential customers are people that you eventually want to influence. But there are fewer of, but more importantly, you want to influence technologists. So the guys on Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, that actually talk about the things that are important to them and could potentially be mentioning your product, either negatively or positively. You want to influence them. And above them, fewer, but once again more powerful, journalists and bloggers, people who write about the area that your technology plays in. And this is where your PR firms start to come into play, is helping the connection between you and the journalists and influential bloggers. And part of what I cover in the book is how do you identify those people and reach out to them. And then the most important influence on Gartner analysts are the CIOs and the top IT people at the Gartner client base. These are the people that drive the analysts to make their predictions about where the market's going and their decisions about who are the leaders in the space. And because the Gartner analysts interact with CIOs every single day of every single week, presumably even when they're on vacation, because that's certainly what happened to me. I remember talking to CIOs from the slopes of Copper Mountain in Colorado. It's a good thing I could get a cell connection. These guys interact with the analysts continuously, and the analysts draw conclusions in maybe not a completely objective way, but if they get many, many calls on the same product or the same issue, they see that as a major trend. And that's ultimately what you want to do. So that influence works up to influence the analysts, and the goal, you can't have a strategy without goals. The goal is to, of course, get the analysts to start saying good things about you, especially moving you into the leaders quadrant. And then the influence flows downhill. So you've made it to the top, and you've essentially, at that point, it usually coincides with Jeffrey Moore's chasm. When you cross the chasm, you become the product to buy, you become the product to be included in the channel. That's when the influence goes down, and you get the payback from your potentially years of investment in working with the Gartner analysts. Just a few elements of analyst influence. There's chapters on each one of these in the book, but I walk through the analyst briefing and how to do that. I look at vendors' briefing books for analysts all the time, and there's a bunch of things I always tell, never use buzzwords like synergy, and because it just turns the analysts off. Synergy, holistic, all these things, they just, they even in their minds replace some things. If you say holistic, they replace it with the word imaginary. They have fun games like that going on in the background, and keep it short. These poor analysts sit through death by PowerPoint 5 or 6 times a day, and do not show them the slide about the problem you address and build this case. You're not selling them anything, and they're the experts. They already know the problem. Get to the product as soon as you can in an analyst briefing. You can do an analyst briefing with Gartner for free. You just email briefing@gartner.com. They'll respond, and they will schedule a time for you, hopefully with the analysts that you've targeted. Maybe some newer guys will fill in for them. The inquiry is different from the briefing. The inquiry, Gartner only holds with clients. So after you've made the leap and you become a Gartner client, then you can schedule inquiries. And this is your chance to get something out of the analysts. So their wisdom, their perception of where the market's going. And of course, as I try and spell out in the book, you are, of course, trying to influence them during the inquiry by your questions, by your knowledge in the space, and you're pulling from them the things that they feel are important, so you know what's going to be critical in the upcoming Magic Quadrant. I cover something that is kind of unique and that nobody else has written about this, but it's the drop-by briefing. The CEOs and top technologists that have been around the block a few times and gone through this know that they can establish a relationship with the analyst without the financial commitment to Gartner. And analysts are going to still have to touch base with the world. And they want to hear about the new companies, and they're more than happy to hear from the founder of the next cool startup. So you tell them that you're going to be in the town, drop by for coffee. They get a break from being on the phone, talking to all their clients, and you've established that link, that connection. The most expensive engagement you can have with Gartner is to participate in their summits and symposium, but I think it's also the biggest potential payoff. Very, very rich target environment for your sales team if you can get them to actually man a booth. I have a lot to say about that. I could write a book about how to motivate or train salespeople how to sell. But if you can get them in the booth, and then if you can also make sure you're taking advantage of every opportunity to meet with the analyst and influence the analyst throughout their 3-day or 5-day symposium. And finally, the SAS day, and this can be kind of daunting for people the first time they go through it. So I've provided a template for an agenda because it's very typical. This is the way it works, and the way you communicate that, the way you make sure the analyst can find his or her way to your office. All these things contribute to building up the image that you're an up-and-coming vendor. So that's just some of the elements. Got separate chapters on them. It's kind of the nitty-gritty how-to stuff in the book, but the fun stuff is what I call guerrilla influence, or guerrilla techniques of influencing analysts. One, you can ask this one is extremely effective. You remember I told you that the CIOs, the Gartner clients, are the most influential on Gartner analysts. So go to your customer base and figure out which ones are Gartner clients. If they're a big company, odds are that they are. but a lot of schools and state and local governments are Gartner clients as well. Find out, ask them, and then ask them a special favor of scheduling an inquiry with Gartner to talk about your product category. So that'll enhance the visibility of the product space that you're in, and hopefully during the conversation it comes out that they are either purchasing you, have purchased you, and love your product, etc. There's a problem with doing this. I only know one vendor that's actually successfully pulled this off because of the difference or the tension between marketing and sales. Sales is constantly beating up the marketing team for the position in the Magic Quadrant. So this is an opportunity for marketing to turn it around and say, okay, this is part of our strategy. You must identify which of your prospects are Gartner clients and ask them to make an inquiry about your product. Sales guy will resist that forever because the Gartner person could kill the deal, and they're terrified of that happening. So they would have to sacrifice a deal just to improve your perception by the Gartner analyst, because if 3 of those happened in a week, the analyst would say, wow, major trend going on. These guys are really starting to shake up the market. Let's talk about targeted advertising. I cover kind of a Mad Men story that I learned from somebody who was probably a Madison Avenue guy in the 60s and 70s. But in Detroit, buying used to be controlled by these purchasing agents. And so the suppliers would have a new engine or a new steering column, and they would eventually be interacting with one guy who didn't have a very high salary, but he made the decision for what could be a $300, $500 million line of business for the supplier. So the advertising agency deployed a madman, I guess, guy in a suit, to stake out the office of the buyer at Ford, who, it's a big glass building then in Dearborn, Michigan. They knew where all the purchasing guys hung out, so they just staked out the parking lot. When the guy arrived, they noted the time, and then after he had left his car, they strolled past his car, and they could look in through the window and see what radio station the dial was tuned to. I told you this is old school, back when we had dials on radios. And then they would have an ad, drive time, audio ad, voice ad, that would play when the purchasing agent was driving to work every morning. Talk about targeted advertising. But worth it, because why blanket the airwaves when only one person is making the decision? We find ourselves in a similar situation with Magic Quadrants. There's maybe one person or a small team of people that control your fate. So if you're going to create a message that you want them to hear, create it and deliver it to them. And one way to do that is in airports. In your first conversation with an analyst, when you meet them, you're probably going to end up figuring out where they live and what airport they fly out of. So buy the airport billboards that sit inside every airport in the analyst's home airport. He or she is going to see it twice a week. Another way that you could really target is to do a direct mail piece. Oh, hey, you're crazy, Steen. Direct mail, we know that doesn't work. 0.4% response rate if you're lucky with direct mail. Well, create the direct mail piece, even if it's sending a coffee cup or a beer mug or just a glossy postcard. Send it to the analyst, not to 50 million people hoping to get 0.4% response. Analysts get junk mail, just like we all do, and they throw it out, of course, but they do look at it because there might be something from the IRS or whatever in it. And as they're looking through it, they're going to see a piece of direct mail from a vendor in the space that they cover. They are going to pour over that piece of direct mail. They're going to look to the call for action. What's it? Is it asking people to join a webinar? It's going to be effective for that one audience because they're interested in what you're doing and what your marketing plan is. And along the same lines, this is pretty cool. Actually, and this only occurred to me as I was writing the book, but a lot of times a vendor will work with their analyst on their go-to-market message. So there'll be a slide deck that they review. How about hiring your ad team to create an ad campaign, and then you go to the analysts and you ask them to tell you which one will be most effective in reaching the Gartner client base. So first of all, that would be great input if you're advertising to the Gartner client base. But second of all, what happens when the analyst is walking through the airport and he sees the ad that he or she helped design? He's going to go, wow, great ad, and I believe what it says. So talk about targeted influence. And that's just one of a few of many of the Guerrilla influence techniques that I include in the book. So if you want more, not only on this site that Max is putting up, will we collect your emails and send you more information, but you can register with my site, analystinfluence.com, and you'll be able to get, not quite yet, but once I have your email, I'll tell you when we have additional free videos that I'm going to create that go into more depth on some of this. And yes, there will be a monthly email and a membership site eventually for my clients. So thank you very much for looking through my slides, and I'll head us back to video so you can see me again.
Perfect. Richard, thank you very much. We're gonna. I've got a couple of questions here for you. I think one of the chapters in the book that I enjoy the most was related to social media, and I have a question here. I'm going to sort of paraphrase it, but it starts going: buyers are turning to social media networking sites like LinkedIn to find new IT solutions. And people talking about getting testimonials or input from other IT leaders in regards to ultimately making their purchasing decision. How much of a role does social media have in influencing Gartner analysts?
So social media has an opportunity to influence analysts. They are on social media, not so much as the PR people that are trying to influence them, because they're all over social media. But it's becoming more and more influential. So yes, interact with the analysts on Twitter and LinkedIn. If you're connected to them on Facebook, or if you can induce them to like your page and follow it, all good stuff. And then you can just have more opportunities to deliver your message continuously and let them know about the growth and excitement. So when you're doing a big event or this big news article about you, more chance that the analysts will see it. Email is still super important. Analysts, at least, I guess speaking from my own experience, we don't mind if you hammer us with press releases about your client wins, and those are real data, or innovations or product releases. As a matter of fact, if we don't see those, we just read the subject heading, right? That's all we need to see. We're analysts. We know what a new client acquisition looks like, but we're seeing it, and it's influencing us or squirreling away in our heads. So do that. That's one of my biggest clients switched out their analyst relations person, and for some reason he doesn't feel that I should be kept in the loop. So now I have to rely on Google alerts on their company to get all the news, but it's now out of his control. But the other aspect of that question is, how much does social media influence purchasing, and is it once again something that's threatening the analyst business, which I just don't believe. When I first got into Gartner, the common refrain in all the articles was, we don't need specialist analysts anymore because we have Google. We can find anything we need with Google. Mm-hmm. We've all learned that's not the case. If you do a search on CRM, right, you're going to get the things that have been social or search engine optimized to come up to the front page. You're not going to find the right forum where the discussions are going on. And if you want a concept of market size and position in a market, you have to go to an independent third party that's collecting that data. The IDCs and Forresters of the world are doing the best job of that. And if you're going to make a decision, on LinkedIn, do you ask another CIO in your space what they use? First of all, they probably won't tell you because you haven't established a trust relationship. Just because you're connected to somebody on LinkedIn doesn't mean they're going to share what product they use. There are plenty of scammers, and I personally get attempts to connect to from a lot of potentially cyber spies, that want to connect to me in some way or influence me for that. And so that you don't have that trust relationship. But the buyers at major corporations do have a trust relationship established over years of reading an analyst material, talking to the analysts probably on a quarterly basis, meeting the analysts at symposium, So when they talk to them, the trust relationship is already established, which you can't do quickly on social media.
Got it. So basically, I mean, obviously Gartner's still playing that key sort of validation role in regards to solidifying the interpretation of trends, so to speak, on a social media platform. Who do you think? Can you share good examples? Who do you think is really doing a good job out there in regards to using social media, in particular LinkedIn, Google Plus, and Twitter, in regards to just conveying a message effectively?
Well, certainly there was a guy at the shoe company.
Zappos.
Zappos, yeah, no question, doing a great job. And now, it's getting to the point where most of the smaller single product vendors are doing a great job because they assign somebody in the marketing team to do that, and they're good social networkers. They engage in chat. The big companies, as a rule, are horrible at it. So, the IBMs or Cisco's of the world, they end up having a Twitter ID for every single region, and it just goes on, and it's not a single voice, and it's pretty much a news source. And they think they've got 228 followers. They think that when they tweet, everybody will pick up on it. And it just doesn't happen. They don't grow that base.
What I'm finding, it seems to me though, in social, as it relates, as IT and social media, that people really are following the individual. It's still the personality. The personalities have got the huge followings. The products have got the followings, but I'm going to be more interested. I'm just talking for myself. I'm going to be more interested to hear from an individual that I've connected with in some way, and listen to how they're, what they're saying about their product and what information they're sharing. Would you? Right. I mean, I would assume there's certainly it's to be encouraged, that we should encourage, senior and actually on every single level, quite honestly, to get involved in social media in regards to conveying a message, a corporate message out into the out into the world, right?
It's a whole of company approach. And the most critical are you have to have a Twitter ID for the company. That's usually managed by a socially adept younger person in the organization. The CEO should have a Twitter account that he or she really tweets to, not just regurgitates what the PR people are doing for him. And the product expert. So the product expert's going to connect to the technology influencers and engage in discussions that will be deep and interesting in whatever you can do in 140 characters. The marketing person will be just releasing news and events and et cetera. And the CEO will be giving the big picture. And then everybody else in the organization should be encouraged through email blasts, internal or whatever internal communications you use. So you send them, hey, everybody, retweet this particular tweet to get the word out. And same thing on LinkedIn. You have to have that, a lot of organizations, LinkedIn, frankly, is a Shark Tank for recruiters, right?
Right.
So it's a little bit of a concern when your people are on LinkedIn because they're using that or getting approached by recruiters. So, but it's still important for the marketing team to make sure the language they use to describe your company and their role is accurate and portrayed in the best way. And don't forget that the analysts use LinkedIn as a tool. It's a great tool. When I want to get an idea for the size of a company, I will go into LinkedIn and you can search by company and see all this great data. I can even dig into some details and see where the velocity with which people are leaving the company or joining the company, and always just the people who join LinkedIn that it has visibility into. So the high-tech California companies have a lot more LinkedIn members than the slow, stodgy company in, let's pick on Germany. So the analysts are using that. That's data to them. So give them the data that portrays your organization in the best light.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing. I mean, one of the common sort of peeves that you hear from people as it relates to social media is they just don't have time to tweet. And I would say that might very well be the case. I think that I would strongly suggest that a team be put together, as you mentioned, a number of people who are identifying different types of information, that is then aggregated and sent through the CEO, the CIO's handle. and to mix it up, quite honestly, as well. Not just hardcore kind of like tech and business, but to show some personality and some interest there as well, because ultimately it's a channel to connect. We've talked about cost, and there's certainly there's in your strategy there are elements that are more costly than others, but in generally, can you give some kind of idea of what it might cost? And I don't know if this is a naive question, but some kind of cost to go from sort of zero to hero, to go from start to getting up into that magic quadrant, or maybe some kind of an idea of what a budget, if you really wanted to make this part of your strategy, what kind of budget allocation should a company be making to at least give themselves a fair shot?
Yeah, and the budget allocation changes as you grow. And usually I advise in most industries you don't need a full-time analyst relations person until you hit that 10 million mark. Maybe sometimes as much as 50 million, if you're in a more commodity type, if you're selling switches or something. So it's not enough differentiation to even bother trying to interact with the analysts. So overall marketing budget should be, approximately 6% of revenue. Companies don't spend very much on marketing other than creating product data sheets and events, local events that they do with their channel partners. It's really hard to peg. I can tell you some of the component costs just to give you a feel for it so you know what you're looking at. So first of all, just a single seat relationship with Gartner, depending on how good you are at negotiating with your Gartner salesperson, I've seen as low as $17,000 a year, but it's more typically $35,000 a year. That gives you the initial access to the analyst. If you're negotiating, you can usually bake in one SaaS day with that. So you get that first meet and greet with the analyst. They come out to your facility. They get the whole pitch of who you are, what you do, and who your people are. And if you want to do that outside of the bundle, when you $12,000 a day for the analyst. And I've been on, when I was at Gartner, I've been on analyst days where 8 analysts were brought in, and the vendor got a discount, so it was only $10,000 a piece. So those are, you can see at least the amount that particular vendor valued the interaction and the opportunity to influence the analyst. If you go to a Gartner event to do it right, you're looking at least $100,000. So you're going to buy booth space, which may only be $10,000 to $20,000, but you also want to be a sponsor of one of the dinners or the social events that goes on, or have the hotel room set aside where there's a party on Tuesday night. I would set aside $100,000 for that event. And there's up to 100 vendors appear at each of the summits, and up to 300 vendors appear at symposiums. So there are a lot that feel it's worth that investment.
Exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, it is an investment, right? And you just got to do your ROI analysis and put it in, put it in the mix. If that's part of your strategy. Richard, let's talk about some fun stuff now. You've got we've got a competition, and everyone who signed up for this webcast is obviously going to we'll be getting in touch with you with the competition winners, and Richard has very kindly extended 100 free copies of his Kindle ebook version of Up and to the Right. And Richard, there was something else that you were going to mention as well?
So actually, just a week ago, I got a email offer from Steve Forbes for his new book, and I've been struggling with this. How can I do a virtual book signing, for instance, if I'm not physically present to sign these books? And Steve Forbes had this great idea. So if you are not happy with having a Kindle version and you purchase the hardback version, or softcover version, the printed version, which you're going to need on your bookshelf anyways to demonstrate to your CEO that you know your job. If you do purchase that, send me the Amazon receipt that they send you. Feel free to carve out some of the identifying information in there if you don't feel comfortable doing that. And I will send you a book plate with my signature on it, which you can put inside the book. So thanks to Steve Forbes for that great idea. But on top of that, you're probably going to want several copies. Now I'm pushing hard, right? Actually, that's starting to happen now. Some of these vendors that have multiple Magic Quadrants they're in have annual analyst events where they invite the analysts from all the firms to appear, and they introduce them to all their top executives. So they're starting to order books for every single employee that attends the analyst event to give them this insight into how analysts think and how you should treat them.
Well, you better start doing some wrist exercises there to get ready for your signings. Anyway, we're going to keep the landing page that we used to generate the viewership for this event. We're going to keep that live. So anyone who's watching this in its recorded form, we're going to send your contacts information obviously straight through to Richard, and obviously facilitate contacts and communication there. That's it, Richard. We really enjoyed having you on the show, and hope that we can get you back on again really soon. Do you have any sort of news and updates? You've got any plans or anything else you want to share just about what you're up to and how people can get in touch with you again?
Sure, yeah. So best email is richard@it-harvest.com, or DM me on Twitter @Steenan. A lot going on this fall. So fall is the big speaking circuit time. So I'm in Germany and Texas and the Caribbean. But in the meantime, I launched a publishing firm, IT Harvest Press, to publish First Up and to the Right. And I've got about 14 other books queued up from authors who've come to me, all with great topics, all with credentials as writers. And the very first one of those may actually get to press by the end of September. So keep your eyes open for that. Brilliant. And on top of that, I'm still working with a traditional publisher. So all next week, you won't hear from me because I'll be off-site finishing the manuscript for my book on cyber defense.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, we're really looking forward to the future installments of your series, and thanks a lot for writing such a cool book. I loved it, and hopefully we got a number of people who haven't read the book yet. Should definitely go and read the book. You might be a winner for a free book, and we'll be back in touch with all the winners in due course. Again, Richard, I'd really like to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thanks, Max. I love your platform.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.